Proportional Response, Book 1, Chapter 11, Part 7, Bright Ideas. Henry started a bit at being interrupted. Hannibal could tell his friend was slightly annoyed when the Duke cut him off, but Henry just raised an eyebrow and replied, "I hadn't finished the question, and you know the answer?" The Duke got a strange, amused glint in his eye. "You don't have to. What burning question is it that has been the target of so much speculation within your intelligence community for years, but could only be asked of me or my sister directly, but no human has ever been in a sufficiently private setting with either of us to ask it?" "Oh no, my friend, I know the question, and I will gladly share with you now. So, yes, I am the one who convinced my sister that we should not only end our attempts to castrate your people, but bring them in as a counter to the Zoltans. Also, yes, she and I debated about it, sometimes at length, and sometimes with some heat, for years before she finally made the decision. Just so you know, and to protect my sister's honor, she was already considering ending the campaign, and that's why she sent me, to get the first-hand information she couldn't. I'd become curious too, of course, and jumped at the opportunity. I spent over a year at our observation post on your moon myself, even spoke to a few of the humans we had abducted. I became convinced that not only were you people too wily, and just too damned stubborn, to die, but that you were just the help we needed, and so far, you justified that conclusion." Henry spoke with wry amusement. "Even when we came back and departed from your plan," Kaslo got that glint in his eye again. "Especially when you departed from the plan?" Golner poked Kasler in the shoulder. "Oh no, you don't, husband. You don't get to sit there and claim that you expected that and hoped for it. You were just as pissed as your sister when they occupied that little system out there, and it wasn't until Hannibal here calmed her down that you started to even look at their data." She turned to Henry. "My husband here is an incredible man, even for one who has received the training and upbringing of a Felderin, but he can be downright insufferable sometimes. What I am telling you now, falls under privileged information, of course. Oh, don't look at me like that, honey, and you can quit giving me the signal to shut up. You said you wanted full candor with this man, so full candor he gets. We will sometimes take credit for knowing things before we knew them, and acting on those things, because what happened when we acted turned out well. It is useful sometimes, and gives one an air of infallibility and all that, but you deserve the truth. So, yes, my husband here, and Ernor and I were ready to chew nails and spit them at you with force. Yoro had a different opinion, and don't think she has let us forget it since." She smiled affectionately at the other woman, who returned the smile with good humor. "Once we saw the information you had to back up your actions, we were just as angry, but at our own complacency rather than your action, and we knew that we had been right to fight Sis for you." Kaslo sighed and waved a hand before he spoke. "I suppose it is just as well that you know all that. Better understanding of each other could lead to better ability to coordinate action." Kaslo gave his wife an irritated look, then shook his head. "I guess I just don't like admitting my mistakes. Anyway, the point being that yes, I interceded with my sister." Yoro cleared her throat pointedly. "Backed up by the data and arguments my wives worked with me to collate, and we moved her from considering stopping the attempted castration to embracing you as allies." He barked a half chuckle. "It took her a while to forgive us for being right about that one." He and his wives chuckled softly, though Hannibal did not see the humor. "Thank you for that then, Your Grace." Kaslo threw a wad of paper at Henry, who ducked and nodded. "Sorry, Ambassador's habit. Anyway, thank you for telling me, Kaslo. You just won me a total of several hundred credits from a lot of intel guys around human space, not to mention some serious street cred. That, of course, makes it a little difficult to transition to the next thing I have to ask you before we get started, but there's a human who was spotted in your entourage, my government. No?" An annoyed micro-expression crossed Henry's face, but he started in any way. "Kaslo, the man is a known pirate, suspected of terrorism, and is an escaped felon. We must insist, no. He is guilty of just as much against the Empire as he is against your Confederation. He was captured, tried, and found guilty in an imperial court, and is serving out his sentence. He is, technically, under my judicial supervision, and I can assure you that he is being punished in all of this. So, that is why Mr. Smith didn't come with us. Hannibal refocused his attention and tried to keep up with the exchange. Henry shook his head and spread his hands.
He seems to have the run of your embassy, and my people have detected no restrictions or other indications of punishment. I am afraid we must protest. I understand that having a human bodyguard is useful to you, and we will gladly provide you with several, all of whom will willingly swear to become loyal subjects of the Empire. But the set of your face says you intend to insist that this criminal continues to watch your back. What exactly is he being punished with under your supervision anyway?
Caslow leaned forward and gave a positively feral grin.
Counting?
Henry leaned back and sucked air in between his teeth while he shook his head.
Oh, vicious. Particularly for a man like him.
Henry then gave a half smile and looked at Caslow with his head tilted sideways.
I don't know. We might have to protest that one under cruel and unusual punishment, which is something else we don't stand for.
The Duke's features softened a little.
Oh, never fear. I let him look up from the numbers before his eyes start bleeding. Usually. And I've only made him print everything out and do it by hand once.
He can't be serious. Even an actual accountant would find that cruel. Henry then began to laugh, and Hannibal felt himself join in. Henry then looked at Caslow's slight grin and abruptly stopped.
You didn't? Not really?
The Duke took a drink from his whiskey and nodded.
Oh, I did. He was being particularly intractable and had begun to forget that, despite our growing rapport, he is still serving out his punishment. And I don't like having to hand out reminders like that, so I try to make sure I only have to do it once.
Henry had a slightly amused, partially bewildered expression. He finally waved a hand at Caslow and shook his head.
Okay, you can have him. I don't want to have to argue with you over it. I'll have someone draw up the paperwork releasing him to your jurisdiction and acknowledging your claim on his punishment. We are well aware that he hit a lot of your people too, though we don't have as detailed an accounting of his misdeeds on your side of the line. I will gladly forward you the full list of charges, proof, trial, and sentencing if you like. Please do. That will make convincing my people that we should leave him to your tender mercies a little easier. There is one other thing I will need though.
A look which could only be translated as a warning settled into the Duke's face, and he quirked a single eyebrow in question. Henry responded.
Regular updates of his progress and rehabilitation. I assume that rehabilitation is the reason you took him on personally.
The Duke nodded, a slightly surprised look on his face. Hannibal felt a little warmth in his hands as a blush of pride at his Bond brother, managing to surprise the Duke settled on him. Henry continued.
Don't be so surprised. We did manage to learn a few things from you people over the years, including a lot of things about rehabilitating criminals. Remember that the dignity of sapient life is one of the principal goals of the Confederation. We are getting more and more of our nations to sign on to better ways of dealing with recidivist people. Punishment still has to be a part of it, of course. Your people learned that lesson the hard way. Still, our process tries to divide lawbreakers between those who can be reformed and those who can't, and then to deal with them accordingly. Comparing our two cultures' evolving justice systems is a matter for another time, though.
Hannibal nodded, as did the rest of the group. For a moment he felt bad for Henry. He and the Duke's wives had his friend outnumbered 5-1. He took a look around the room and realized that everyone's glasses could use topping off. Lady Yoro joined him, and conversation strayed to inanities for a few moments. Just as the feel of the room changed, and the two powerhouses turned to tackle the big issues, he had an idea. The conversation had drifted to interesting cultural traits of the various races, and he began to wonder how they would all communicate and still keep to the plan in the coming trouble. After all, it wasn't like he and Henry or the Duke could meet with one another on a regular basis, nor, especially, go running to talk to one another whenever something disrupted the plan. Henry smiled and set his drink aside. The Duke did the same, and the both leaned forward, obviously ready to get to weighty matters. Then they both glanced at him and stopped. The Duke looked at him as if he was trying to puzzle out a mystery, but Henry spoke in a somewhat hard tone. Okay, Hannibal, out with it. He blinked and looked around the room, and felt himself shrink back a little when he found every eye on him.
Out with what? You've had another of those crazy ideas, the kind that you aren't even sure you should bring up, and you see that we are about to get to the weighty stuff, so you are holding back. Let's hear it.
Panic welled up in him for a moment, but he pushed it down. He was among friends here. Henry now wore a half smile, but Kasler looked between himself and his friend with a look of great curiosity on his face. He answered quickly, if for no other reason than to prevent awkward questions.
Well, I was thinking about how we will be hard-pressed to keep coming up with plausible reasons to meet as regularly as we're going to need to, then thinking about how much both our people are enjoying themselves out there right now.
He saw amusement in all the faces around him and felt a little deflated. Of course they thought of this, that was probably the point. Still, they may not have thought of everything.
Okay, I can see by your amused glances you already thought of this. Well, it was probably the intent of the whole charade to begin with, wasn't it?
They all met this question with nods and broad smiles. Kasler spoke up.
What is that quaint phrase you humans have? Great minds think alike. I never cared for that one much, but in this case, it seems apt enough.
Enibal cut back in.
You obviously plan to make a regular thing of these gatherings, and will use that as cover to meet face to face, since going through the secure comms channel that was built is no substitute, sometimes, for direct meetings. This idea can be expanded, though, to be all the more effective, both in terms of the cover it provides us and the contacts it allows us to make. We can invite the Thermicon, Arabso, and maybe even others.
Everyone in the room looked at him with completely poleaxed expressions, and a feeling of some pride flushed his hands. To think of something like that when they obviously hadn't, it made him feel useful, at least.